Many see American involvement as the main reason why Germany lost World War I, and many see German aggression in the years leading up to the war and during the war as the main reason for why America joined. And many see this German aggression as the result of the actions of one man, Kaiser Wilhelm II. He started the naval arms race with Britain. He ruined the diplomatic relations to Russia. And he continued the German tradition of disliking France. So what if this changed? What if his father, Friedrich III of Prussia and Germany, survived? Ah, smoking, the reason Queen Elizabeth reigned for 70 years instead of 30. It caused the death of Friedrich III in 1888, after having suffered from throat cancer a while. However, had he lived a more healthy life, it is presumably that he would live longer. It is of course impossible to predict exactly when he would otherwise have died. However, say that he lived to a very average age of 80, he would die in the year of 1912. Now, Friedrich was a believer in the ideals of the revolution of 1848, about democracy. While he was still the Crown Prince of Prussia, his goals were a united, democratic Germany. And after ascending to the throne in 1888, he starts exactly that. Germany starts the route to democratization, and the first thing he does is to fire Bismarck and hiring a more liberal chancellor. Now, not starting the naval arms race and otherwise being democratic and way more friendly to other European powers greatly improves Germany's relations to the other countries, especially Britain. And in 1912, at the year of Friedrich's death, war with England seems extremely unlikely, and Germany is for the most part friendly with its European neighbors. With maybe one exception. Now, Germany's relations with France were always terrible, mostly because of the loss of Alsace-Lorraine in 1871, but also because of continued hostilities from the French part. The French leaders also disliked that a democratic and liberal Germany gave a war against the Germans less legitimacy internationally. So when Archduke Franz Ferdinand is killed in Sarajevo in June 1914, Germany has not laid the Schlieffen Plan, which is a very aggressive strike through France. Instead, they are preparing for a defensive war in any effect. To this effect, the forces in the east are substantially stronger than our timeline, while the forces in the west are mostly on the defensive. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand is killed in Sarajevo, Austria delivers an ultimatum to the Serbs. When the Serbs refuse, war breaks out. Following the beginning of the war, Russia starts to mobilize. Germany also starts to mobilize to defend their partner, even though they really do not want this to grow into an all-out war. The big question in this timeline is of course the blank check, but in order to not complicate it further, I'm just going to assume that Austria declares war on Serbia anyway. Soon Russia joins the war. Germany still has a defensive alliance with Austria, as does Italy. And as Russia is now forced to make the first move, they eventually have to declare war on Austria, forcing Germany and Italy to oblige to their Triple Alliance obligations and come to Austria's aid. Therefore, by the beginning of August, this is the European map. The next great power to get involved is France. France cannot simply allow Russia to be crushed by the Central Powers. Britain, on their hand, is much more friendly to Germany. The naval arms race has not yet happened, as Wilhelm II has only been at the throne in 2 years, and Britain itself is way less anti-German than in our timeline. So, in 1915, in the summer, the front looks like this. Britain is still neutral, but the debate is raging of whether they should join the war on the French and Russian side. The thing is, British foreign policy dictates that they need to prevent one European power from growing too strong, and now Germany is really rising in strength. Of course, the British are also concerned that warring another democratic country would be dangerous, and it is also very unpopular in the British public. So in the end, no action is taken in 1915, and the war on the European continent continues with the warring partners. By this time, Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire have joined, so Serbia is defeated, and Russia is fighting a war both on the front in the Caucasus and on the Eastern Front. France is currently fighting the Germans on the Western Front as well as the Italians, and they are facing the Italians in North Africa at the Tunisian-Libyan border. So both of these states are under immense pressure. So in 1916, the French and Russian situations are drastically worsening. The British debate about joining is still going on, but seeing it as they now would join the losing side, they again decide not to intervene. In the autumn of 1916, the war is eventually won by the Central Powers, who march through the capitals of Paris and St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, American President Woodrow Wilson is in the middle of the process of winning re-election. However, his view is the same as the British, too late to do anything about it now. Besides, Germany is democratic, and the usual Prussian and German spirit of conquering and annexing is a bit more toned down during this rule. Yes, Wilhelm II is the German emperor, however, the nature of the country is completely different. The governing body of Germany is the Reichstag, not the Kaiser. Now, Wilson did have reason to be optimistic, since the current German government was ruled by a center-right coalition without any extremist elements. And it is true that this democratic Germany would be less ambitious in its conquests. First of all, it was governed by a center-right coalition. This consisted of the National Liberal Party. The National Liberals ruled in a coalition with the Junkers and the Center Christian Democrats. These are symbolized by the yellow, light blue and dark blue in the Reichstag map. So it was a sizable coalition that was able to govern with the majority, even though there was some significant differences between the parties. And so, it had come to this democratic government of Germany to prevent the Kaiser from taking more than the establishment in Europe would accept. Just kidding, they took everything. Anyway, so what about America? Being a peaceful bystander to Germany taking over the continent leads to a bit of resentment in America. And instead of sliding into isolationism, the American public becomes more wary about what happens abroad. During the 1920s, worrying about German growth in Europe and Japanese growth in Asia becomes normal among the American public. And in 1927, President Coolidge started drastically expanding the US Navy in order to be able to operate across the oceans. Now, President Franklin Roosevelt is extremely wary of the Japanese expansion in Asia, and during the 1930s he takes more and more aggressive stances against the Japanese, and eventually decides to send massive aid to the Chinese when the Sino-Japanese War begins. What happens next depends on the imagination.